everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss about the appendicular skeleton. But before moving forward, if you are new here, please like and subscribe and don't forget to hit the notification bell. So let's start. The appendicular skeleton consists of approximately 126 bone, and these 126 bones are majorly divided into four grouping. These are the pectoral grid, and the pectoral grid composed of scapula and the clavicle on each side. The second grouping is the upper limb, and the upper limb consists of humerus, radius, ulna, bones of hand, carpal bone, metacarpal bones, and phalanges. The third grouping is the lower limb, and these lower limbs consist of the femur, metatarsal bone, and phalanges. The fourth grouping is the hip bones. Hip bones include the ilium, ischium, and pubis. Some significant surface features of major bones are that mainly refers to the distinct shapes, marking, and characteristics found on the outer surface of the bone that are important for their functions and connections to the other bones and muscles attachments. So these features are like projection. Projections are the area where muscles, tendons, or ligaments generally attaches. The example of the projection are tuberocytes and spines. Tuberocytes, as you can see here, the greater tuberocytes and the lesser tuberocytes. So these are the area where the muscles, tendons, and ligament attach. Next example is the spines. As you can see here, spines, spinous process. Here also the ligaments and muscles tendons attaches. Next surface feature is the depression. So depression basically includes the uh, indentations that can accommodate blood vessels or nerves. For example, fossa, grooves, like as you can see the fossa here, sub scapular fossa, and this glenoid cavity. Uh, and this radial groove. So these radial groove or the subscapular fossa, they provide accommodation for the blood vessels or the nerves. Next surface feature is the articulating surface. That means smooth areas where bones meet to form joints. Like for example, heads and condyles. As you can see here, the lateral epicondyle, lateral condyle, medial condyle, epicondyle. These are the examples where the smooth. These are like smooth area, and this allow the other bones to meet and form joints. Here, the humeral head is also provides you the same function. Next is the foramina, and this foramen basically is a small opening that allows the passage of the blood vessels and the nerves. For example, obturator foramen, as you can see here in the pelvis, obturator foramen. This allows the passage of the passage for the blood vessels and the nerves. So these were the few examples of the major features of the bones that you can see on the surface only. Let's discuss each grouping of bone one by one. So first one is the pectoral girdle, or you can call it as a shoulder bone. And this pectoral girdle consists of the right and left scapula and right and left clavicles. They basically provide movable yet stable support for the upper limb. So first is the scapula. Scapula also known as the shoulder bone, and this is basically found in the posterior superior portion of the thorax, as you can see here. This portion, scapula, and they provide motion for the arms. They are triangle in shape and has three borders. So they are triangle in shape. As you can see, these are triangle in shape. So they provide three borders: superior border, medial border, and the lateral border. On the superior border of the scapula is the scapular notch, and these scapular notch basically contains or provide a nerve that innervates shoulder muscles. So this portion is called the scapular notch. And next to the scapular notch, or the posterior surface of the scapula, divided by a scapular spines into supraspinous fossa and infraspinous fossa. So next to the scapular notch, the anterior surface of the scapula is smooth, hollowed depression, and this particular depression is known as subscapular fossa. As you can see here, this region is called the subscapular fossa, and this provides a area for the blood and vessels to accommodate. Next to this is that is at the posterior surface of the scapula, is further divided by the scapular spine into two, that is the supraspinous fossa and infraspinous fossa. As you can see, this region, supraspinous fossa and infraspinous fossa, and this is divided or separated by scapular spine. So this region is the spine, scapular spine, and this side you can see the supraspinous fossa, and this side you can see infraspinous fossa. This spine further runs and expands to the acromion. As you can see here, this spine further runs and expands to the acromion. So here you can see the narrower spine is a little bit narrower, and this side you can see the broader area, and this broader part is called the acromion. Another projection of the scapula is the coracoid process, and this coracoid process projects anteriorly from scapula. As you can see, this projects anteriorly from scapula. This particular portion, or the another projection, where the scapula has a three sharp angles, and these sharp and the scapula also has three sharp angles known as lateral angle, inferior angle, and superior angle. So this is the superior angle, lateral angle, this particular area, and the inferior angle, this area. So these are the three sharp angles of the scapula. Next is the humerus moves into the shallow depression of the glenoid. This particular area is called the glenoid cavity. As you can see here in the image, the humerus, this area, this humerus moves in the shallow depression of the scapula, and this depression is called the glenoid cavity. This is just below the just below the glenoid cavity is a bump known as infraglenoid tubercle. Just below this, as you can see here, this particular portion is called the infraglenoid tubercle, and this is the attachment point for the tricep brachii muscles. The next bone, that is the part of the pectoral girdle, is the clavicle, and this clavicle commonly known as the collarbone, and it is S-shaped bone. This particular bone is a small bone located between the scapula and sternum, as you can see here. This is located between the sternum and scapula. This particular bone. The blunt end of the clavicle is called the sternal end, and the horizontal flattened end is called the acromial end. As you can see here, this particular region is little bit flattened and it is called as acromial end, and this blunt end is called the sternal end. Another grouping of the bones is the upper limb. Upper limb mainly consists of the humerus, radius, ulna, bones of hand, that is the carpal bones, metacarpal bones, and phalanges. So humerus is the long bone and it articulates with the scapula as its proximal at its proximal ends, and with the radius and ulna at its distal end. As you can see here, the humerus is distal to the ulna and radius, while it is proximal to the, as you can see here, and where it is proximal to the scapula, right? So this is proximal to the scapula and distal to the ulna and radius. Humerus has two large processes, that is the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. And these greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, these processes are attachment point for the muscles originating from the scapula. So here the muscles can attach. This particular region is almost similar to the hemispheric structure, and beneath this is the surgical neck, and this particular point is very much prone to the fracture. This region is called the head of humerus, and this anatomical neck, this particular anatomical neck is below the head of the humerus and ends in the rim known as anatomical neck. The head of the humerus ends in a rim known as the anatomical neck. When we talk about the deltoid tuberosity, then this is a rough area on the lateral surface and is attachment site for the deltoid muscles. This particular region here you can see the nutrient foramen, and this is responsible, this basically carries a small holes, and where it allows the penetration of the blood vessels and the nerves to enter into these bones, and through this the bones gets nutrients. Next is the medial epicondyle. This medial epicondyle is the bump that we feel on the medial side of the elbow, this particular region. This is the medial epicondyle, and this region is called the lateral epicondyle. Next is the trochlea. This is the hourglass shaped structure, and as you can see here, this particular part is called the trochlea. Next is the capitulum. This is where the head of the radius fits into the humerus, and it is almost round hemisphere. It looks like round hemisphere. Next bone that comprises the upper limb is the right radius ulna. Basically, right radius ulna makes up the skeleton portion of the forearm. So these radius and the ulna. So these right radius ulna combine together and they make up the skeleton portion of the forearm. So when we talk about this right radius portion, or the right radius, uh, this particular radius has a proximal head and look like a wheel, as you can see here, and distal to this is the radial tuberosity, and on the proximal part of the ulna where the head of the radius fits into the ulna is a depression, and this depression is known as the radius ulna, as you can see here, this point. the radius ulna. This is the head and the neck of the radius, and the body projection on the lower end of this radius bone, where it provides the attachment site from the bronchio-radiali muscles, and this particular projection is called the styloid process of radius. Next, when we talk about the ulna, the other part of this forearm bone, this ulna basically has a U-shaped depression on the proximal portion called the trochlear notch, and above to this trochlear notch is the olecranon process, and this is the most proximal portion of the ulna and is also commonly known as the apex of elbow. Next is the articular surface of the ulna is the ulnar notch. This particular portion is called the ulnar notch, and this is the head of the ulna, and this region is called the styloid process of ulna. Uh, the next bone that we are going to discuss is the hip bone. This is the lower portion of the appendicular skeleton, and these are mainly consist of three fused bones, that is the ilium, ischium, and the pubis. The hip bones are joined anteriorly by interpubic disc. This interpubic disc actually is a fibrocartilage pad, and this along with the anterior portion of the pubis form the pubic symphysium. This the inner portion is called the pubic symphysium, and inferior to this is the subpubic angle, or you can say the pubic arc. This angle is greater than 90 degree in a female and less than 90 degree in males. The large hole at the inferior part of the hip bone is called the obturator foramen. So this is called the obturator foramen. This space is covered by the obturator membrane. The most superior hip bone is the ilium, and if you feel the top part of your hip, you are feeling the iliac crest. The large depression here you can see is called the great sciatic notch. The interior shallow depression of the ilium is known as iliac fossa, this particular region. The ischium is the inferior to the ilium and is the part of the hip bone on which you generally sits. The ischial spine is a sharp projection. This particular region is the sharp projection of the ischium, and is an attachment site for the hamstring muscles. The anterior and the superior to the ischial tuberosity or the ischial spine is the is a cup-like depression known as acetabulum. This is the cup-like depression and it is called as acetabulum, a region in which all three hip bones are joined together. The acetabulum is the socket into which the femur fits. The ischium connects to the pubis by a elongated portion of the bone known as ischial ramus. This region is called the sacrum, and in the pelvis of the male, the greater sciatic notch is less than 90 degree and approximates the angle if you were to separate the index finger and the middle finger. This portion is called the coccyx. This joint here called the sacroiliac joint. From the fourth grouping of the bones, that is from the lower limb, right femur is the part of the lower limb, and this is basically the bone of thigh and is the longest and the heaviest bone and is only bone in the thigh. It articulates proximally with hip bones and inferiorly with tibia. Femur has a proximal, medial, and spherical head. As you can see here, uh, it has a spherical head which inserts into the acetabulum of hips bones and an elongated constricted neck. On the head of the femur is the depression known as fovea capitis, and it is the region where the ligament attaches and forms the femur from the femur to the acetabulum. Next to this that is below to this region is the neck, below the neck, or the two large processes called as the trochanterus, and this is the area where the muscles attached. This particular dark blue line is the line of attachment of the border of the synovial membrane, and this broken green line denotes the line of reflection of the synovial membrane, and this red line determines the line of attachment of the fibrous capsules. This region is called the nutrient foramen, and it provides nutrients, or it allows the passage of the nutrients. The shaft of the femur is curved and bows anteriorly with the posterior shaft marked by the linea aspera, meaning rough line. This particular shaft. At the proximal portion of the linea aspera is a rough area called the gluteal tuberosity. The next bone which we are going to discuss is about the bones of leg, that is the tibia. Tibia is the largest bone of the leg, and which is the weight of bearing the bone of the leg inferior to the femur, and it is medial to fibula. The tibia or the tibial condyles are separated by intercondylar eminences, and they articulate with the condyle of the femur. The tibia is roughly triangular in cross section. The ridge on the anterior tibia is known as the anterior border, and this is the ridge that hurts when you hit your shin. Or there is a rough area on the anterior surface of the tibia known as the tibial tuberosity. This region is the tibial tuberosity. This is the attachment point of the uh, patellar ligament, and at the distal end of the tibia is an extension of a bone known as the medial malleolus, and that is at the um, extension or at the distal end. As you can see here, the distal side of the tibial tuberosity is the medial malleolus, and this bump is one part of the ankle joint as it articulates with the talus of the foot. So this was about the tibia. The lateral part or the lateral side of the tibia, there is a bone located called as the fibula, and fibula is the smallest bone. As you can see, this one, this is the smallest bone, not the smallest, like in comparison to the tibia it is the smaller one, and the fibula has a proximal head and a distal processes called the lateral malleolus. This is the head of the fibula, and this portion is called as the lateral malleolus, and it is the distal part. The lateral malleolus is the other part of the leg that forms a joint with the talus. The fibula is not a weight bearing bone but is an attachment point for the muscles. So this is the attachment point for muscles. The next bone which we are going to discuss is the bones of foot, and the bone of foots are comprises of 7 tarsal bones, and these includes the talus, which is the bone of the articulation with the leg. Directly below the talus is the calcaneus. As you can see, the region here below, This is the calcaneus. This bone is the talus bone, and the calcaneus is also or commonly known as the heel bone. The bone anterior to both the talus and the calcaneus is the navicular. The foot has a three cuneiform bones known as the medial cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform, and the lateral cuneiform. As you can see on the image, the lateral medial cuneiform, and this one is the intermediate cuneiform. Locate location location of the cuneiform bone is not the most is not the most lateral bone in the foot, but is the most lateral of the cuneiform bones. So the bone lateral to the third cuneiform is the cuboid. One way to remember the tarsal bone is with the mnemonics. Children that never march in line cry. The beginning letter of each word is the same as the tarsal bone: calcaneus, talus, navicular, medial, intermediate, lateral cuneiform, and cuboid. One more bone that we forget to discuss about is the bone of the right hand. So each human hand has a 8 carpal bone, and these bones are aligned in 2 rows. The proximal row of the lateral to the medial includes the scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, and the form. The distal row include the trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate, and the hamate. On the hamate is a hook-like projection called the humerus or humulus. The other way to put the bone in a proper order is to use the mnemonic device that use the first letter of each carpal bone. S for scaphoid, L for lunate, etc. So in a sentence, if you say loudly to Pam, time to come home. So most anatomical terms derive from the Latin or the Greek. The carpal bones are little bones, yet they have their own distinctive shape. The scaphoid is the only carpal bone with a Greek name. It is shaped like a little boat. And scaphos is a Greek for boat. So next, the rest of the carpal bone have a Latin names. The lunate is a shape like a crescent moon. Luna means moon, and the triquetrum is derived from triangle. The siphon is P-shaped. In the distal row, the trapezium, it rhymes with thumb. The metacarpal bones are located in the palm, and each metacarpal bone consists of proximal base, body, and the distal head. The metacarpal are labeled by Roman number 1 to 5, and first being the proximal to the thumb, and the fifth being proximal to the little finger. Metacarpal bones second and fifth have little movement, but metacarpal first allow for a significant movement for the thumb. So there are more to discuss about the hand, but today we will stop here, and this was all about the appendicular skeleton. Thank you so much.